just complete that. But the agenda is not that. The agenda is to, have a discussion and engage. So if I could ask in the very beginning of this session, if any one of you have any specific questions or a point to make to start the discussion, or a topic to be started alongside this PPT, I would be very happy to take that in a discussion format and then have a lot of interaction, because I see a lot of faculty available here. I myself a faculty for last 17 years, so we're all of the same the group. So I think it's more than I talk. If we have a discussion kind of a thing, maybe that would be more specific, more clear, and more prompt and proper use of time that we have this 1 hour 15 minutes, whatever it might be. So if you have anybody have any specific questions that you are looking at, I might be very generic, but if you are looking at anything very specific, if you could come across that, then we would move the discussion alongside. Anyone, any questions, any specific topic that you would like to focus on? So I think the answer is no. There are 40 participants, and then I know this is a common phenomena that happens all across. I'm guiding 6 scholars now, and then I work with almost 10 of my co-authors on various projects. Now, what is the very first question that we ask when we start a work or a research work? What is the fundamental question that we ask to ourselves, or we discuss? Is anyone any clue that what should be the first question that somebody should ask to themselves or to their peer when we start a paper? Anyone, if anybody is still awake and then listening to the session, what is the first question, or what is the question that I put across to any of my scholars or students when they come up with some particular idea, title, paper, topic, whatever it might be? Okay. So I know the answer is again.
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Sir, please.
Yeah, one of the student has asked a question, sir.
Okay, it's in the chat box. Okay.
Yeah,
what will be the course
outcomes
of this project? Okay. Okay, you are looking at the outcome. Okay. Yep. Anybody else? Okay, you are looking at the outcome. Okay. Any other question? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Sir, I think first question is, what is the main domain of your paper or project? Okay.
Okay, so somebody says my domain is let's say electrical engineering. My domain is some the cathode ray tubes. I may be very naive on this, but I'm just trying to connect. So you talk about the domain, right? Okay. My fundamental question all the time, going to Vivas here and there, very fundamental question that I ask is, what is the question? What is your research question? That is the only one question, the worst preliminary question I ask, or anybody should ask for that matter. What is the research question that we are trying to answer? Now, all the time, people, when I talk about this, though it is there in the literature and all this, say that, do we really have a question when we are doing a research? Are we really answering a question, or we are trying to find something new? Okay. Now, it is for me all the time is a question. Now, what is the question that you are trying to answer? The question might be, are students satisfied with my class? It's a simple question. You need to find an answer to that. Okay. Do X and mixing an X to Y, does it bring Z or not? Okay, that's a question again. If you multiply X with Y, what happens? Okay, that's a question. But always we start with a question, but the point is that every question looks to be interesting. Every question is from the person who has come up with that particular topic or that particular question. For him, it is always very new. For him, it is always very good. For him, it is always very interesting. For a person who has come up with that question, for him, it is always very, that question is very new. But somebody like me, somebody like you as a professor or a faculty and etc., when you listen to that particular question, you might have a different opinion. The opinion might be, oh, this question, I already heard it. I also know the answer. Then what is that you are doing new? Then he says you then, no, this question is not answered. There is no answer for this question yet. You say that, oh, is that so? Just give me a minute and you go to your, the literature survey. You find that particular paper which talks about that particular question, and you put that across to him, say that, see, this is the paper which is talking about your question, and here is the answer. That is answered. What is there big about it? Now, for every journal publication, I have published in, an SCI journal and an SCI index journal, an ABDC. I have almost, 10 plus Scopus index publications. I have a book on my name. So as an editor for almost 5 top-notch journals, what I look into is that when I read an abstract, in the whole abstract, I would just like to find out what is the question that the paper is trying to answer. That is the only fundamental thing that I look in on. Based on that, my decision of rejection and acceptation goes on. Just by figuring out a question in a abstract, or maybe in the introduction section of a particular paper, when you don't explicitly write that question, the question is, does incentive system increase the motivation of employees to perform? Somebody may not write the question so explicitly in their paper, but reading the abstract, I may find it out. And when I find that question, if I don't feel that interesting, if I feel that the answer is already there, if I feel that this question is not going to be a part of my journal, or it is not suiting to my journal objectives, I simply reject that. That is a basic first rejection criteria of the paper anywhere in any journal, irrespective of a scientific paper, a conceptual paper, an empirical paper, or a computer related paper, and an algorithm related paper, and etc. It is all the time, first, foremost, all the time is the research question. Is the question interesting? Is the question unanswered before? Is the question worth reading? Or the solution to the question is worth reading? Okay. Is the question meaningful? Is the question relevant for the contemporary domain, or the context, or the environment? These are the interesting things that make a paper readable by an editor or a reviewer or a reader. My first submission is that the question for any paper is the most important criteria to get accepted or rejected. Please get it from me this day. This is the bottom line. Now, the whole context of what do you call publication is, you have a question first, you have some blah blah in between, something called as methodology, discussion, or whatever you might call it as, and at the end you have the answer for that particular question, right? A question and an answer, in between some other thing, done. That makes a paper. Now, what makes a good research? Okay, what is a good research contribution? Okay, what is a research which is said as, this can go into SCI, this can go into Scopus, this can go into A-star, this can be of so and so. How do you measure the quality of a particular paper? Okay, how do you say that, oh, my paper is the best, it can go into SCI 7+ impact factor? Now, how do you decide upon that? What are the hints? What are the points that would decide that, this is a very vital and a significant contribution, so it can go into so and so journal? How do we assess it? How do we measure it? Any idea? Any clue? Any idea? Any clue? Let's have a discussion kind of a thing. Anybody who's one-to-one would like to talk to me about this, and I would be really happy. Rather than I just giving this as a gnan. Most of you would know some of these points. Okay, so this taxonomy looks maybe very, very complex. Maybe for some of you it might be very easier to understand, but it is very simple. Okay, any theoretical, any conceptual, any technical, any scientific, any kind of paper works or research works, how do you measure their contribution? How do you say they're very, they're great, they're good, or they're average, or they are worst? The very fundamental taxonomy that we generally follow in order to see whether this paper is good or not is this taxonomy that I see. If you can see, the gray one is called as is the low contribution, and the white one that you see has the higher contribution. Now, what are the works which fall under the white part of the graph is that if you could see, there are two things. One is testing the existing theory. We have a fundamental theory in electronics or electrical or in mechanical, etc. If you take a fundamental theory and trying to test it in a different context or in a different setup or in a different environment, or just by tweaking one of the variables, etc., you're doing that. That is testing the existing theory. Okay, on one hand. On the other hand, we are talking about developing a whole new theory. Okay, so these are the two main components which talk about whether a particular paper is doing significant contribution to my journal or not. As an editor, I would look into that. Now, if you're talking about very simple, what do you call, theory, a very, very well-known theory, been proved hundreds of times in different timings, different setup. So if you have a very basic theory and then you are just trying to test it with a new sample and just redo it again, we call it as a repetitive study or a replicative studies. So those kind of studies are just reporting something which has been already there in the literature, which is already done. So those kind of contributions are considered as very small, and the research done in that particular context with that kind of solutions or with that kind of results are called as just reporting kind of research works. So their contribution is very, very less, the research which falls here. Okay, but the research which completely comes up with a new theory, something like this, okay, or completely mix up an existing theory, two existing theories, and trying to find out a new theory, or integrating existing theories and trying to come up with a new theory, something like that. The one that falls here, level 5 on building new theory, level 5 of testing the existing theories, all that particular kind of research works are considered to be very, very contributive and have got significant impact. So those kind of works are the one which go into SCI indexed and the Scopus Q4, Q3 kind of indexings, and then that kind of works do happen. So what we generally look in when we look at a paper is that, is it just a replicative study? Strong theoretical background? Is it just testing a theory, or is it, building up a whole new theory? Or the whole context of the methodology is different, or the results may be sometimes the unobvious. So those kind of contributions are the one which are very interesting to see. When you start a question, when you start a research work, what is the first and the foremost thing that you need to ask to yourself, or your co-author, or your partner? What is the important questions that you need to ask, say that, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the right research that goes on to publication for SCI? Okay. The first question is this paper worth writing? Now, what do you mean by worth writing? Okay. All of us, when we do our researches, we always feel that, yes, we are doing a right paper. We are putting a lot of effort, and this is going to be one of the best papers. And I am always answering something very new. So my paper is the best one. Now, being that all the time would not be very rational. So you need to ask to yourself, when you think that particular topic or question is worth, when you think it is worth, it is better that you go search in the literature, saying that what does the literature say about your work or your topic? What kind of work has already been done? Per se, you pick up, customer engagement on social media. How people are engaging, and you think that you think that the answer about how people are getting engaged, what is the psychological thought process that is going when people want to engage on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, and so on and so forth. What is the psychological concept that is going on? You think that nobody has answered that particular question. You think that, but I think then you should correct yourself by going into the literature, reading about it, and see that whether that particular question has been already answered or not. If not answered, what are the different ways it has been approached? If there is a particular gap or not, that is what we have to look into it. So what? Now, per se, if the question is already been identified. Now, one of the beauties is that if the work that you want to do is been already identified, is already been done, if you feel so, then what can be done? Now what? I always tell that, don't leave the track, stick on to it and read more about it and try to connect the dots. Okay, so that one fine day, in the same context, you will find a particular topic, concept, which is unanswered. That is called as gap. This is called as gap finding in the research terminology. So you read a lot about the particular, generally what happens is that whenever we start doing a research and somebody says that this question is already answered, this research is already done, why do you want to do it again? So we just get disheartened, discouraged, and then say that, okay, I'll find some other topic, I will leave it here. Rather than doing that, I think, if we have a small hunch that, this is going to be one of the best topics and is it of your interest, I think you should never leave it. If you never leave it, you should keep on reading about it, you will definitely find an answer. So again, whether the topic is keep on reading 20 to 30 drafts or otherwise, if you in the initial stages you do not understand whether you are doing the right work or not, I think it's a lot of time. Okay. Any questions, any doubts? I think Maybe Saujanya ma'am has some questions.
Sir, okay.
Okay, so choosing a topic, obviously very common and very obvious is that how do you choose a topic? The most common thing that I have seen is that number one, it is your area of interest. Somebody might be into electrical, electronics, or civil, or architecture. They feel that a material, working with different materials, or finding out a new material, or trying to test the strength of a material, or some other thing, because it is your area of interest, you start working on it. Number one, that's how you choose your topic. Number two, what generally people do is they pick up the contemporary one, the one that is ongoing, a hot topic. The most hot topic these days going on is artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on and so forth. So they pick up that particular topic because it is hot, and then you pick up. These are the two basic ways, or the very obvious ways why people pick up. There is nothing wrong in doing so. It is quite acceptable. But are you following the deductive way of looking into it, or you're following the divergent way of looking into it? What is the theory backup that you do for that particular question is the most important thing. Now, choosing a topic obviously is very broad when you initially start, and then you should, narrow it down to a particular question. Now, or a research objective. The whole discussion of ours would go about understanding how do you narrow down a whole topic, a bigger topic, into one simple question. For all the time, for me, it is about the question. You should have one simple question that we are trying to address through our research. Now, the question, when I say is simple, it should be simple in terms of its statement, right? Now, the question, as you said, can have many things like why, how, when, what, and so on and so forth. Okay, the question may have these, and based on these when, why, how, etc., the methodology changes. I think I think you will agree with me. Like, for example, if I have to say what is the effect of X on Y, then I would say I am talking about a number. I am trying to find a number. What is the impact of X on Y? I'm just trying to find a number. Finally, the answer would be in terms of a number. But if I am say why is the effect on X on Y? When I say why is there an effect? What is it? I'm trying to search for not a number, but I'm trying to search for a reason. So the whole context may be, I may be doing a qualitative research, maybe some kind of conceptual work. How X is impacting Y. Now I'm not looking at the number again. I'm looking at how it is impacting. What is the procedure, or what is the algorithm, or what is the mode it is affecting, X is affecting Y. So again, I'm looking at a different context. The whole methodology is different. So I say that if you have a clear-cut question, and if you could understand it well, if you write it very simple, it makes sense, it makes relevance, the rest of the research is done. Now, 80% of your research is done if you have a question which is very beautiful, interesting, worth doing, and the answer is worth finding. And if you could write it very simply, in very simple statement, then the 80% of the research is done for me. The rest is doing the research, writing the paper, and publishing it. The 80% of the effort should always go in defining the question, trying to find out whether it is good, interesting, relevant, and so on and so forth. Okay, and then that statement, the thesis statement I'm stating here, I'm talking about is that research statement that I'm talking about. when you're talking about a question, it should be in the form of a statement. Does what do you call incentive systems create motivation in the employees? So does it create or not? When I said does, the answer is in the form of yes or no. Yes, it does. Yes, it does not. Now, when I want to form a dichotomous kind of an answer, then the whole methodology is different. Now, if I said how incentive system motivates the employees, now how is a different question. When I'm using how, the whole methodology changes. So the statement is very, very, very important. The question statement is very important. Then choosing a topic, of course, I would talk about the taxonomy of a research paper later, but of course it would be very broad initially, and you have to cut down into the very narrower concepts, like sticking on to one particular context or sample or population or area or domain and etc. You have to narrow it down, because our researchers cannot be so big that we spend a lot of time on it, maybe 1 or 2 years and so forth. Then you go to Emerald publishers, you go to Science Direct, Elsevier, Sage, any of this, all of its abstract has this component called as originality. When we say as originality, we are looking at whether the question or the research that is trying to answer something is doing it for the first time or not, or is it being repeated by somebody. It has been already done, but somebody is just repeating it. So what is the value that it is going to create, and how original it is? That is what that we are trying to see. Or, as I said, repetitive works, replicative works are the one that does not go into top journals. The one which are very original, new, for the first time, etc., or one have a lot of value in terms of contribution and are accepted in the top-notch journals. Okay, and sources. I don't know how do you go across finding a topic? What is your mode of deciding whether a topic is good, interesting, relevant or not? But my way of doing it is searching the literature. Whenever I say searching the literature, I only look into or read the papers which are top-notch. Again, I do not read papers which do not have any impact factor, or which is less than Scopus. Minimum Scopus index is the minimum benchmark of a paper that I read. Otherwise, below that, the evidences from that papers are never ever considered. So right from SCI 10+ impact factor to Scopus, these are the areas, or these are the kind of journals we look into. Only those kind of evidences, etc., should be included in your paper whenever you are citing something like that. Anything less than that, just by looking into your references and the quality of the papers that you are referred, can be easily get rejected in the good journals. So the sources where you are trying to pick up the evidences for your work is also very important. So when you read top papers, then your idea, your process of thinking towards whether the particular research makes any sense or not matters. Not any mediocre kind of papers will ever do any kind of help to you. How do you narrow on your topic? Of course, you have to be more specific in terms of a particular country or geographical area, maybe a demographic factor, maybe somebody doing only on children, somebody might be doing only on women. So you're just trying to narrow it down. Does it really work? No, not most of the times. Answer is not most of the time, but there is no choice most of the time for the researchers, because when you do not narrow it down to a specific topic and etc., then I think it becomes a very lengthy project, and it takes a lot of time and effort and cost. So in order to get quickly published, we try to narrow it down to a very specific context or a population. That is all right. But when you write the discussion section, or when you try to justify why you have narrowed it down to certain population, the evidences have to be very strong. Your justification has to be very, very strong. What do I have to say? Is it a single question clearly stated with adequate evidence for the answer is okay? Or should you have multiple research questions in a particular research? Ideally, each research work might have multiple questions, but if you have if you're doing a research project which is trying to answer 3 questions. Let's say, what if X is included with Y? How X impacts Y? That is Y, variable Y, and why does it impact? For example, you have 3 questions in a project, but I think each of these questions should be one paper or one outlet or one writing that has to be done. So yes, your project may have multiple questions, but if you could cut down that into simple question, and for each question, if you could write a paper and publish it, that is one which is appreciated, can get through easily further. Is it 1 or more papers? Yep. Yes, as I said, you can have a research project which may take 6 months to 8 months or 1 year maybe, which is trying to answer maybe multiple questions. But when you write it, do not put all the questions in one paper and publish it as one paper or one thesis or anything. Just try to make it into different studies, and each study can be one paper. Per se, my thesis, my PhD at University of Hyderabad has three studies. One is a quasi-experimental study, and then the other 2 are survey methods. Then each study I published a different paper. So yes, it can happen. So let it not make it look very clumsy. Very, very specific, very straightforward, simple question, interesting question, and an interesting answer is the one that is looked into a paper. Nothing more beyond it works. Take it from me. Okay, so what you want, need to write a paper. The next question is whether I am writing an original one, whether I am writing it properly, whether the format is right or wrong. Am I writing it the right way? Now, writing is again an art. Right from writing an abstract to introduction to discussion to conclusion, each section is an art to write. I suggest some of you could attend. There is something called as academic writing courses. Maybe on many of the online platforms, MOOCs are also available in NAPTEL and all. And these something called as academic writing, which they very specifically specify how do you have to write it. I'm also on the advisory board of Elsevier, where now and then I give this sessions like this on academic writing. How do you actually have to write a introduction section? How do you actually have to write an abstract? What should it contain? What should it not contain? How do you have to attract the editor? What is the right audience? Who cares for my paper? Is it the scientific scholars? Is it the students? Is it the managers? Is it the practitioners or doctors or academicians? Who are the people for whom this research is going to benefit? So thinking them in view, your implications, your results have to be accordingly written. You have to modify your writing style accordingly. And obviously, to which journal you are sending, again, each journal has its own format. IEEE has its own format. Then Then Mendeley has its own format. Of course, you might be knowing this already. So again, choosing on the journal is also very important. So which journal? The simple answer is that you might find a journal of your topic. There might be multiple journals, and then you have to find out which one is the most suitable one. So you have to look at the topics that particular journal covers. Then would it match my audience? Very simple answer to this question is in most of the publishers like Emerald, Elsevier, Sage, Science Direct, IEEE, in all of this, there is something called as Find a Journal tab, wherein you go click, it will ask you different fields. You have to just copy paste your title, then it will automatically tell you which is the suitable journal where you can put your paper across. That is one of the best ways of finding a journal. Ask a mentor or any senior scholars of yours where to put. Also check in for the impact factor of the journal, and then consequences of the wrong decision. Once you do not publish or it gets failed, then just try to find out the alternate one. Try to find out why it did not go through that particular journal. Okay, so the next one is you have to find out the impact factor, which is very easy. You have to just go on Google for the impact factor. Every top good journal has on the web page their impact factors. Just try to see that what kind of works are being published, follow their style, their writing style, their exception paper styles. Just copy that. Basically, that's the trick. Then a scientific article has a critical argument, what it should have. As I said, there will be a problem statement, and that problem statement has to be converted into a question. That is the first and the foremost thing. Second one, for that question that you are trying to find an answer for, okay, to tell that that question is relevant, important, interesting, you should have strong evidence from the literature. Okay, that argument in a scientific paper has to be shown. Unless you very strongly argue that this is a topic of interest, this is why you should read my paper. If you don't argue with facts, with evidences, with proper citations and references, which are most relevant and should be recent, the argument cannot be bought by the editors to go across. And then validate the evidences. You also have to look in which paper is giving you the evidence for that. For example, if you say X leads to Y, and this statement is given by a paper which is not recognized. Now, if you're putting that in your paper, I don't think that I will buy that particular evidence or argument of yours. So you have to look into the credibility and the validity of the evidence that you're putting in. And your conclusions have to be very strong, very straight and simple. This is the anatomy of the scientific paper. If you could just focus on the size of the shape here. This is very broad initially. So when you start writing a paper, you should be very broadly talking about what's happening in the world on that particular context, to a particular country or to a particular demographic or the geographic area. Then you should talk about the problem. So it is from a broader concept to a narrower concept when you are talking about why this research has to be done. So what is your understanding about the whole world in particular context? From a very broader discussion to your problem statement, which is very narrower, you have to condense it from here to here. From here to here. Step 3, it's like a funnel, from very broader discussion to a very straightforward point or objective of the research has to be, your paper also has to be written like that. The style has to be like that. Okay. And when you come on to your methodology, from there, you have to start going from very specific to very general or to very broader. Okay, that is how it moves from very smaller point to this width area. That width, the size also is trying to define what I'm trying to tell you. Is that, you know, you should talk very broad, come to a question, find an answer, and the answer has to be elaborated or to be discussed at a broader level. So that is the whole context or the anatomy of how do you have to actually write a paper, and what as a reviewer I look into when a paper is written. This is what I very conceptually look into a paper. Okay, at this juncture, if you have anybody have any questions, any questions, this is getting really boring. If you have any very specific questions, maybe out of context, I'm ready to discuss. Otherwise, you know, it's a customary that, you know, I have to finish my PPTs and then say bye and go. Anything that is specific. Okay, I have a huge experience in paper publications in some of the top journals, and then I'm a reviewer, and as I said, you know, maybe review 1 or 2 papers every day almost. So keeping that as the background, if you have anything very specific key, what do you really consider when you read a paper, when you accept or reject a paper? What is that you look in? Any questions, something like that would be very interesting to discuss. Otherwise, I think, you know, I'm being very redundant by saying some of the points which you might have already known. Okay, when you are searching for your literature, should always, you know, talk about what has been already done in the literature. The best way of putting the literature across is cite as much as possible. See that the citation paper that you are citing comes from some of the top journals. Number 2, your literature should be very relevant to your topic. Number 3, it should contain most recent works. Your literature review should contain your most recent works. So those are some of the things that we look in when we are looking. Then be thorough in your search. Very highly sensitive, top-notch journals to very specific, you know, to the topic also have to be found out. Then, okay, so the process of writing a paper, just have a outline of what you want to write, have a blueprint. So I said the anatomy from very broad to narrow, and then you write broader. So that blueprint has to be there in your mind before you start that outline and start writing in the same context. Plan multiple drafts, the sections, each draft. Then tables and figures, be very prompt. Of course, with your co-authors and etc., I have tried to have deadlines and try to finish. One of the most important sections of any paper is, for me, is introduction. Just by reading the introduction, you can know the quality of the paper, and just by reading the introduction, you can even think about rejecting and accepting the paper. It should be very audience specific, very broader to narrowed point, very specific point, very broad discussion to a specific point. The introduction should be like that. The introduction paper should be like, or section should be like that. And of course, when you have a specific journal in mind, just look at the style the journal is asking you to write, and then write accordingly, and find out the knowledge gaps have to be written very clearly. You should very clearly write in your introduction section what is that gap that you are addressing, what is somebody has not done yet and you are doing it. That has to be very explicitly mentioned. Please do not confuse the readers or the reviewers. They would not accept it. At the end, all the introduction section in a paper should end with discussing a question, stating a question, research question, or research objective, or hypothesis. Always your introduction should end up with this, irrespective of what is the type of paper you are writing, a technical, a scientific, a conceptual, an empirical, a viewpoint, irrespective of whatever it is. The method section, it has to be very clear. You write what is the methodology you're following. You should include subheadings like sampling, sampling technique, sample size, or the context. Then you may go about writing the what are the different softwares or etc. that you have used. You have to be very specific. There can be subheadings in that. You have to write very clearly about, and then most of the times let your methodology section be in the past tense. Your result section has to be very clear, specific. Try to follow the norms of the journal about the quality of the what do you call, the figures, tables, and so on and so forth. Again, it should be in the past tense. The writing should be in the past tense. Interpretations have to be very specific, and then tables to be very clear and as much as indexing as possible. Then discussion section is very one important. The last, the conclusion section, etc. It should try to answer the introduction may we have written in the first section, in the introduction section, the hypothesis or the question. You have to write an answer to that here in the discussion section all the time. You should always in the discussion section should write about what is the important thing of your paper, what is not the important thing in your paper, what are the strengths of your paper, what are the limitations of your paper, who is it going to benefit, your results, who are going to benefit. All of this has to be written in the discussion paper. They should and ought to be included. The discussion paper section should be included in that. Last paragraph should be all the time is a conclusion section. Past and present tense, yes. Most of the time when you are writing the introduction section, it can be in the present tense, but the methodology, the review of literature sections can be most of the time in the past tense. Okay. Again, when you're writing the discussion and the conclusion sections, it can be in the present tense. It's about writing, drafting, revise your paper, write it again, get it proofread. That's the process is already there. Read as many times as possible before you send it to the journal. Ask somebody to read it. Better you find a proofreader for it. Maybe paid, and then get it done. So just by this, I would end up proofreading before submitting is most important. You have to look into the grammar, text, citations has been done properly or not. Blah blah blah. You would already know that. So abstract is again one of the most selling point of your paper. It is the one that sells your paper. Otherwise, the desk rejections would be very high, and most of the desk rejections happen only because of the abstracts, and it's an art to write the abstract. Because most of the journal have their own format of writing the abstract. Some of the journals say that we need only 250 words. Some of the journals say we need only 500 words. And in that also they specify that you should mention this, you should not mention this, and so on and so forth. So basically writing a abstract is an art. So most of the people write abstract first, but I always recommend saying that you write the paper first, then finally you write the abstract. And always remember whatever the reviewer says is right, because he's an expert. Just go along with him, try to please him. Write the responses to the reviewer very politely. If you have a contradictory point, just be very patiently, politely contradict the reviewer and then try to convince him. just try to write to the editor what is wrong with your paper. You can always ask. If the paper is rejected, very simple, just try to find out the other journal. Most of the time, all the journals which reject, most of the top journals which reject, they always try to give you a reason. Just work on the reason, improvise it, and send it to the other journal. Do not get disappointed.